of our City Council. Madam City Clerk, would you be so kind to call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And the roll is for Mayor Jean Goss,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Edward Garcia,
Present.
Councilmember Rationale Arizmendi,
Present.
Councilmember Kelly Creeves,
Here.
and Councilmember Robert Parkhurst.
Present.
Mayor Goss, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam City Clerk. Mayor Pro Tem Garcia will lead us in the pledge and do our inspiration tonight.
If you're able, please rise and join me in the pledge. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So we're well into spring now, and just trying to decide what to talk about. But I think that at the very least, we should mention that a lot of the major faiths in the world are celebrating different events. So we have Ramadan for the Islamic faith going on right now, coming up in a couple days. Passover for those of the Jewish faith, and then we're well into Holy Week for those of the Christian faith. And during these times, these major religions reflect on what is going on and what's coming up, and also it's a time of prayer. So I encourage everybody to have some reflection, prayer time if that's what you do, and also love your neighbor. We're a great community of neighbors, so I'm really big on loving my neighbor. That's one reason I felt this is one thing I can do for my community is serve you in the capacity as a council member. But I also wanted to read a couple quotes. I know there's some of the council members and mayors read some quotes, and I found some good fun ones about springtime. Some are funny, but the first one is, "It was one of those March days when the sun shines hot and the wind blows cold, when it is summer in the light and winter in the shade." Charles Dickens. And I thought today was one of those days. I was on the ball field today. The wind was cold, but the sun was hot, believe me. "Some old-fashioned things like fresh air and sunshine are hard to beat." Laura Ingalls Wilder. "Spring is the time of plans and projects." Leo Tolstoy. "In the spring, at the end of the day, you should smell like dirt." Margaret Atwood. And this one by Mark Twain. You know Mark Twain, it's going to be a little, well, we'll see. "It's a spring fever. That is what the name of it is. And when you got it, you want to, you don't quite know what it is you want to do, but it just fairly makes your heart ache. You want it so." And then finally, this quote I find in our busy lives with deadlines and work and everything, it's a quote that I felt kind of calmed my mind, and when we have those times where we can slow down, we should take advantage of that. And it's by Lao Tzu. "Nature does not hurry, yet everything is accomplished." That's all I have.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Okay, moving on with our meeting tonight. I'd like to see if I can get a motion for approval of the meeting agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries unanimously. Also like to see if we can get a motion for approval for reading resolutions and ordinances.
I'll move to approve reading resolutions and ordinances.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
And that is unanimous. Do we have meeting minutes? There are no minutes. Okay. We'll skip that. We'll go to the next agenda item. That brings us to mayor and city council reports. Who'd like to go first?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Short
Councilmember
report.
Creeves.
Short report. I watched the Planning Commission meeting from last Thursday, which was the first, as most of you know, the first public hearing specifically on the proposed Meadows project at Bailey Canyon. And I thought that the Planning Commission really did evidence the depth of thought and analysis that we all, come to expect of them. And I thought they did a nice job of organizing the meeting and sort of laying out some of their concerns at the top of the meeting and allowing for response to that, both from the public and from the applicant. I just really thought it was a well-done meeting, as we expect here in Sierra Madre. Lots of civic engagement, lots of civic participation. I thought overall, really well done in terms of organization, and I commend staff and the Planning Commission for really running the kind of meeting that we really should have on a project this monumental and potentially serious.
Who's next?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Parkhurst.
So, as usual, there was a Cpa Board meeting, and nothing to report coming out of that. Also, I was at an event on Friday, and I saw the chair of the Air Resources Board. I took a moment to thank her for the money that we received for the clearing of the brush just outside of Bailey Canyon Park. We've got this is an exciting month. In addition to all the faith-based things, we've got Earth Day coming up on the 23rd over at Memorial Park here. We have a number of folks a number of booths that'll be there. I think there'll be some live music, so I think it should be a really great day. And then on Earth Day, next Friday, we have a ribbon cutting for our solar panel project, which I'm extremely excited about. We've got a great lineup of people that are planning to attend, and so I'm looking forward to seeing that and seeing the switch flipped, so to speak.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I have no report today.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Mr. Mayor, so yes, last Thursday, the Senior Commission met here in Chambers, and the meeting was more of a planning meeting for the year. So they are going to have the Older American. It's not going to coincide with the county's Older American celebration, but that will be on June 15th from 4:30 to 7:30. And the plan is to have it more of an open house in the Hart House, kind of welcoming everybody back to the Hart House. Also, there's going to be the community yard sale. We're used to that being over in Sierra Vista Park along the parking lot, but this year it's going to be in Memorial Park, other side of the Hart House in the lawn, and that's going to be on June 11th from 8 a.m. to noon. And also, the Seniors Rock Concert will happen again. They have decided on July 10th. They have not decided on who will be representing the Seniors Rock Concert this year yet, but it will be on July 10th. And a couple encouraging things is that numbers are going up for the senior programming. More and more seniors are coming into the Hart House post-pandemic, or near the end of the pandemic, and coming in and enjoying all the programming that there is there at the Hart House for our seniors.
Thank you. Well, I have kind of a substantial report, so please bear with me. I've been kind of busy, as we all have. A couple weeks ago, I got to attend the LA County Sanitation District's meeting. It's a monthly meeting that mayors of our city attend, and not a whole lot of earth-shaking news coming out of there, but they do monitor the COVID-19 virus in the sewage that they treat. And so I don't have an update on the current variant out there, but I will have that in the next meeting in 2 weeks for our next city council meeting. But that's about all I have to report from that. Had a great time at the Wisteria Festival. I got to tell you, I got to ride on the cart with the president, Luther, the president of the Chamber of Commerce, up and down the boulevard. I guess that's the mayor's privilege, I'm not sure. Maybe I was just the guy there that was next to the car when he, I had some great food, and you know what? I was really blown away by the car show there. I just thought it was amazing. We had cars on both sides of the boulevard, all the way from Hermosa, almost just about down to Arnold's. Amazing cars, and I've had several people tell me since that they think we should be considering a full-fledged car show for Sierra Madre, maybe on both sides of the boulevard, all the way from Baldwin to Lima. And so I'm gonna hopefully get some interest at the Community Services Commission level and see if they have some interest in running with that. Also attended the Library Board of Trustees meeting. Not a whole lot to report, except that since they've reopened after the surge, because they had to close for a while, circulation is way back up. They are back in business, big time. Then I also went to, and I know a number of my colleagues were there, at the Sierra Madre Community Foundation whiskey and wine event at the Young's house 2 Saturdays ago, I guess. It was just a jam-packed event. The foundation made a lot of money, and I just wanted to thank the Youngs again for opening up their home to everyone that showed up. It was just a lot of fun and great for the community. Last week I got to participate in a very small way in the library bookmark contest, something the mayors get to do every year. And I remember last time I did it in 2017, it was kind of a blast. And so I was at the libraries last week, and all the kids in town get to compete by drawing potential bookmarks, and ultimately 4 different bookmarks will get printed and distributed in the city. And so one of those is a mayor's pick, and there's a city manager's pick, and there's 2 other picks. So I got to present an award to for an outstanding job of artwork for a bookmark. That was a lot of fun. Tremendously well-attended event. Just another example of how our library really fills a very crucial role for the people of this community. And when I heard Councilmember Creeves mention the Planning Commission, I did not attend it, but I did watch it from end to end. And I think her observations are accurate. I guess, Planning Commission meetings are not always the most exciting meetings to watch, but certainly it seemed like there was a lot of productive conversations going on there. So I look forward to the next one as well, which I intend to watch online. And also, I've been asked to make a few announcements. These are just kind of things. A couple of them have already been brought up by my colleagues here. And this is in size 11 font, so out comes the reading glasses. In case you hadn't heard, we've lost a former police chief, just passed recently. Chief Joe Sargent passed on April 11th, 2022. He was a member of the LA County Sheriff's Department before coming here to Sierra Madre as our chief. So that's always sad to hear. Week of April 10th to 16th is National Public Safety Telecommunications Week, aka Dispatchers Week. It recognizes the invaluable and often unseen work of 911 dispatchers nationwide, and we've got some good ones right here in Sierra Madre, so that's apropos. This Saturday, the 16th, if you're around, if you're downtown near Kirsten Court at 3 p.m., Savor the Flavor moved, and they're having a reopening ribbon cutting ceremony. I will be there to help them cut the ribbons, and so stop by for some of their specialty foods and gourmet gifts. And I wanted to just follow up on what Council Member Parker said. On April 22nd, we will have the Solar Project ribbon cutting event. It's going to be at 9 a.m. at the City Yard, so if anyone wants to be there, please come join us. I believe our County Supervisor Barger will be there, our Congresswoman Chu will be there, and others. And because I think it's really made a mark here in the San Gabriel Valley as kind of a very impressive development in our community. On April, I told you this is going to be a substantial report. Sorry. On April 23rd is the Earth Day Festival located at Memorial. This will be our first. Earth Day Festival located at Memorial Park, so it's April 23rd, that's a Saturday, 9 a.m. to 12. This is the first ever festival. The city of Sierra Madre is observed for Earth Day. There will be an array of booths from local agencies, nonprofits, and organizations available free to the public to encourage our community to think and live sustainably. In addition, there will be live music. The Graywater Alliance will be hosting a laundry to landscape graywater diversion workshop. So put that on your calendar if you're nearby. And just another in terms of vacancies on city commissions, we have a expected vacancy coming up on the Planning Commission. We have an expected vacancy coming up on the Community Services Commission. We have 2 anticipated vacancies on the Library Board of Trustees, and the Natural Resources Commission has 1 current vacancy and 1 anticipated vacancy for a total of 2 vacancies. So those of you who are really public spirited and really want to get involved and be a part of the solution to whatever we need solved, I hope that you will consider applying for those vacancies. And that concludes my report. Yay.
Oh, Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I think there is one other event this weekend. Isn't the fire department hosting the Easter egg?
Of course, wasn't on my list, but
I think it's probably Saturday, right?
when is that?
Saturday
It's
9
9 a.m., right? So fire department, Easter egg hunt, Memorial Park, 9 a.m., right? Okay. Okay, the city's very busy right now, you know, very busy. Okay, moving on. I'm going to turn to our public now, see if there are any public comments on items that are not on the agenda tonight. You'll be limited to a 3-minute comment, and hopefully you've submitted a yellow card to our city clerk, and I think she will be calling out names in order.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The first speaker is Alicia Lopez.
All right. Good evening, Honorable Mayor Goss and council members. My name is Alicia Lopez, and I am the Director of Tobacco Programs at Day One. I'm also current coordinator of DUI prevention efforts in SPA 3. So I know you all know us, but just for those watching who don't, Day One is a local nonprofit organization with a 35-year history of providing effective, high-quality, and culturally sensitive public health education, intervention, and policy development in cities throughout the San Gabriel Valley.
Could I politely interrupt you for a minute?
I'm sorry?
Does this have to do with the smoking discussion?
No, I'm actually sharing about another program.
Oh, okay.
That's why I'm doing
My
it during
apologies.
general. But yes, thank you. I wanted to share about one of our DUI prevention strategies in recent years throughout SGV and SPA 3 region. Over the last few years, in partnership with the Rethinking Alcohol and Other Drugs, or RAD Coalition, we have partnered with over 60 bars and restaurants throughout the San Gabriel Valley to offer free coasters and table tents with prevention messaging, reminding guests of the dangers and repercussions of driving under the influence. Since the project began, we have distributed over 14,000 coasters and nearly 3,000 table tents. We've also reached over 30,000 SGV residents via social media during drinking holidays. You may have seen some of our materials here in the city on Super Bowl Sunday and St. Patrick's Day. So these are our Super Bowl. These are our recent St. Patrick's Day. So far this year, we were able to visit and partner with bars and restaurants in 8 SGV cities, Sierra Madre included. I wanted to give a public thank you to Lucky Baldwin's Delirium and Cafe, Casa del Rey, and the Buccaneer Bar for participating. We hope to expand our reach in the city, and we'll be back for our Cinco de Mayo DUI prevention efforts, so you might be seeing these around town. And lastly, I'd like to thank the city staff and council for continuing the discussion regarding the implementation of a smoke-free multi-unit housing ordinance tonight. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, the next speaker is Mary Lou Caldwell.
I'm Mary Lou Caldwell with the Sierra Madre Kiwanis, and we are going to have our chili cook-off on the on the 7th of May. I've got a lot on my calendar. On the 7th of May. And we invite anyone in the community to join us. It will be in a new location this year at the Masonic Temple, now called the Lodge. And we will have all the chili you can eat. I think James said he was going to participate again. James is a 2-time winner.
Show off.
And there will be line dancing. This is sponsored by the Kiwanis, and the Kiwanis' main aim is the children in our community. They are involved with the Winterfest, with the Halloween window painting, and all the other events that go along with the celebration of Halloween. They, with the grammar school, they provide the Imagine Arts at Creative Arts. I work with the middle school students in their activities with the group over there, and they serve. They get their hours in town volunteering with the community. Wisteria Day is one of their fun favorites, and they did help us this last Wisteria Day, even though it was entirely ad-libbed. So anybody that's interested, I have tickets, and tickets will be available at the bottle shop and at the new Savor the Flavor. So you can pick them up there. They're $30, and as I said, you get a free entertainment with line dancing and all the chili you can eat. Thank you.
Thank you,
And I
Mrs.
do
Lattimore.
have tickets with me tonight.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, the next speaker is Deb Sheridan.
Good evening, council members. Deb Sheridan, Valley Vista Drive. I am addressing you tonight because I am very concerned about what happened at the Planning Commission meeting last Thursday night. New Urban West had sent postcards to residents in Hastings Ranch imploring them to attend the meeting. They then gave them dinner at the only place in town and gave them t-shirts to wear. They also put reserved on the first 2 rows in the audience. People who arrived later than 6:15 for the 7 p.m. meeting had nowhere to sit. Even the 5 rows of seats in the foyer were completely filled by the time of the start of the meeting. The couple sitting next to me in their green shirts admitted to another resident who was looking for a seat that they live in Pasadena. I heard them grumble over and over about how the commissioners were asking too many questions. Apparently, their free dinner went only so far. The residents of Sierra Madre who showed up to express their concern about this project didn't need a free meal, a green t-shirt, or a fan to get our point across. No circus for us. This was not a tailgate party or pep rally. Making light of an important project like this at the first Planning Commission meeting was in poor taste, embarrassing to the church, and a new low even for this developer, who submitted 37 cards from non-residents, including from Arizona, in support of the project. New Urban West should not have been allowed to reserve seats. Apparently, filling seats with non-residents is a common ploy by developers. When they were trying to build an unpopular dialysis center in San Gabriel, the developer gave out-of-town patients jackets to wear to that city council meeting. When this happened in Boulder, Colorado, before a city council meeting, the mayor asked all non-residents to leave. I would urge you to not grant special privileges to a developer. The eloquent Faye Angus would implore our city councils to follow the money. Sadly, I will say the same thing. Follow the money. Please be fair to our residents as you go through the process, and I thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Sheridan.
Mr. Mayor, the next speaker is Alex Arrieta.
Good evening. I also wanted to talk briefly about two items. One was the meeting last week, and it really was, I believe, a sham. I'm going to have a New Urban West. Really undervalued the importance of that first Planning Commission meeting. I thought it was fairly despicable. They had Sierra Madre residents sitting in the lobby and sitting outside because they couldn't have seats. First 2 rows were reserved. It's indicative of how New Urban West has approached this whole project from the start. In March, they held an open house at the Sierra Madre Women's Club talking about the 42 houses with realtors from Pasadena who I had reached out to and said, tell me about this. Oh, we've been engaged by New Urban West for these homes. Well, has the project been approved? No, not yet. But here they are talking about these homes. And I spoke with the Planning Commission about this last week, how disrespectful that is of the deliberative process the Planning Commission and the City Council still has to go through before a project is finalized. I thought it was totally despicable, and I shared that with Mr. Frankel. I think it's also ridiculous the fact that that New Urban West sent out postcards to folks outside the city. To the previous speaker, when you have folks attending here from Lakewood, Menifee, Upland, Azusa, 6 people from Pasadena, 6 people from Monrovia, it's unacceptable. And it serves to undermine the entire process that this Planning Commission and City Council is supposed to be undertaking, which is the largest housing development in the city of Sierra Madre history. And it's unacceptable. New Urban West is not trusted in this community. Despite what you saw last Thursday, when you walk out in the community, as myself and other members of Protect Sierra Madre have seen, you would expect that and you would see that to be the case. They do not trust New Urban West. And it's particularly because of stunts like last week. Lastly, Protect Sierra Madre, along with Preserve Sierra Madre, has an organization of 500 people. New Urban West refers to this as a small group of people who are opposed to this project. No, it's not small. We have over 500 people in our membership. We have another 200 people who have donated to our GoFundMe page. And we are working towards an initiative to place a measure on the ballot to change the zoning of the monastery to hillside residential. And we have found significant amount of support across the community. Our petition to bring that parcel, which is adjacent to the mountains, in parity with all other large parcels in Sierra Madre, which are adjacent to the mountains. Our attorney, who represents us for both the petition and for CEQA, has sent a letter to alert the Planning Commission that the EIR is legally deficient and that any decision made without revising and recirculating the document would put the project in legal jeopardy. I implore all of you to be super engaged with this process and with New Urban West. We don't trust them, the broader community does not trust them, and what they showed last night gives us so much reason to show why they can't be trusted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arrieta.
Mr. Mayor, the next speaker is Gary Hood.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, council members. I came to speak on a couple of subjects, and when I heard that former Chief Surgeon had passed away, he's one of the reasons that I'm speaking here. I'm really sad to hear of his passing. I would like to compliment our police department that they have started up the neighborhood watch, the captain of the Neighborhood Watch program to get people involved in the community, and I think that that's an excellent program, and I'm glad to see that's getting started up again. When Chief Sergeant first started here, his wife was crossing the street and almost got hit by a car. So I don't know I know he was working on crosswalks and that, but I think that our lighting system for crosswalks is excellent. And I would like to if the citizens of the community are watching, and those who are from out of town especially, we have a law, and it's very expensive, it's very dangerous. You do not make a left-hand turn across a double yellow line to get a parking spot. And that happens a lot, and it is dangerous. And as far as the chili cook-off, Mary Lou, I'm going to get a couple of tickets. And two-time winner over there. We'll see if he can hold his title. I'm looking forward to that. Anyway, thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I speak to keep our community safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hood.
Mr. Mayor, the next speaker is Dee Alcorn.
Dee Alcorn on Grandview. Councilperson Krebs mentioned the Planning Commission meeting this week, and I'd like to expand that just a hair, because it was another marathon meeting. Like you folks, I think this is sort of setting a precedent now. I don't know they had the meeting you all had over at the school there, and that was a marathon thing about the Meadows project. And also, again, we had another lengthy one. I think that ran till about 11 o'clock or something like that. It was a marathon session. And I think that says a lot for you folks trying to do as much as you can. They give everybody a chance to speak up, say their thing, and they tried to answer as best they could. So I think that the city council and the planning commission are to be commended for trying, really going over backwards to try and reach out to the community on a very, very contentious and or at least a very subject that's in the minds of a lot of people. So I just want to say that both you areas should be commended. I think it really shows a lot of patience and a lot of interest over and above, I think, on trying to meet the transparency and where we're coming from. So I think the city council and the planning commission should be commended for doing an excellent job trying to get there. It's a tough road to hoe, and I think you all are doing a good job. And I want to let you know, thank you, appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Alcorn.
Mr. Mayor, there were three, in addition to the public's comments today, there were 3 emails submitted for items not on the agenda. One email sent in by Deb Sheridan. Her comments were read today. One email by Darlene Papa. Another email by Barbara Valturo. All 3 emails were forwarded to the City Council for review and uploaded to the city's website for public access.
Thank you, Madam City Clerk. And that concludes public comment on non-agenda items, and we are now going to move forward to our consent agenda. And I'm going to have to lean on you again, Madam City Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before the City Council today are several items for consideration. There are 6 items for consideration. Consent item A is the consideration of Resolution 22-16, approving certain demands. Resolution 22-16, the city staff recommends that the City Council approve this resolution for payment of city warrants in the aggregate amount of $780,846.19. Sierra Madre Library warrants in the aggregate amount of $3,610.20, and payroll transfer in the aggregate amount of $369,162.69. Consent item B is the consideration of Resolution 22-17, directing the sale of the property located at 487 Woodland Drive in Sierra Madre. This is pursuant to Government Code Sections 37350-37351, and it is recommended that the City Council approve Resolution 22-17, directing the sale of the property located at 487 Woodland Drive. Consent item C is the second reading of Ordinance 1448, and that's amending the city's general plan land use map and zoning map. It is recommended that the City Council conduct a second reading by title only, waiving reading in full, amending the general plan land use map and zoning map. Consent item D is the second reading of Ordinance 1449, amending Chapter 17.29, that's the RH multiple family residential high density, and Ordinance 1450, adding Chapter 17.39, religious housing overlay of Title 17 in the zoning of the Sierra Madre Municipal Code. It is recommended that the City Council conduct a second reading of Ordinance 1449, amending Chapter 17.29, and Ordinance 1450, adding Chapter 17.39 of Title 17 of the Sierra Madre Municipal Code to conform to the recently adopted 6th cycle 2021-2029 housing element update. Consent item E is the second reading of Ordinance 1451, amending Chapter 17.34 affordable housing of Title 17 zoning of the Sierra Madre Municipal Code to conform to state density bonus law. And it is recommended that the City Council conduct a second reading by title only and waive reading in full of Ordinance 1451, amending Chapter 17.34 of Title 17 of the Sierra Madre Municipal Code to conform to state density bonus law. And finally, consent item F is the second reading of Ordinance 1452, adding Chapter 17.58 small home lot developments to Title 17 zoning, add Chapter 16.18 urban lot split to Title 16 subdivisions, and add Chapter 17.59 ministerial design review permits to Title 17 zoning of the Sierra Madre Municipal Code to conform to state housing law. And it is recommended that the City Council conduct a second reading by title only, waiving full reading of ordinance number 1452, adding chapter 17.58 to title 17, adding chapter 16.18 to title 16, adding chapter 17.59 to title 17 of the Sierra Madre Municipal Code to conform to state housing law. Mr. Mayor, that concludes my report.
Wow, we got our money's worth from you tonight.
Yeah, that was a mouthful.
So I will ask the council, I'm gonna take us through this one item at a time to see if you have questions for staff, and I'll just start with item A. Item B,
Mr. Mayor?
yes, Councilmember Creeves.
So I had a couple of questions. I understand that this is, the resolution that we're considering tonight is prompted in part by action taken by the Los Angeles County Regional Park and Open Space District in the process of the sale of the surplus property. But given that, I wondered if we would condition the sale or the entrance into a sale agreement upon approval by the district, because it wasn't clear to me that the district had actually approved the sale. So I wasn't sure of the sequencing here, that we're actually approving the sale before they've actually approved it. So I didn't know if it should be conditional.
So, to answer your question, Councilmember Creeves, the district has not approved it yet. The district is waiting on the city council's approval before they consider this item.
So basically, we will approve it, and if they don't approve it, then our approval becomes sort of null and void because they have a approval right over the sale.
Correct.
Okay. And then my other question goes to, and maybe we'll take this up as a separate item or separate action item down the road when this process proceeds. But do we need to actually approve payment? And it wasn't clear to me exactly what the payment to the district would be, because it seemed like under the agreement there was the greater of a number of amounts, and I was wondering if we were able to recoup any of our costs and things from the sale price when we were to sell it to the private owner.
So we are unable to recoup our costs, our administrative costs incurred in trying to sell this property. The district requires that whatever the fair market value is of the property, that they receive all of that. So I forget what the actual amount is that they granted to the city, but it was something less than whatever the fair market value is today. But as a condition of the contract, it says that if the property is ever going to be sold, that they're entitled to the full market value of that property. And I don't know of a way to, unless maybe if we condition the purchase and sale agreement to say something like, here's the fair market value and apportion administrative costs separately in the actual price of the property, and say that the fair market value is represented by the appraisal and the administrative costs are represented by whatever evidence we provide. We may be able to separate out those two costs potentially. It's something that staff can consider, but again, that would be something for the potential purchaser also to agree to.
So have we actually secured an agreement from a potential buyer to pay the actual appraised price, or are we still having to negotiate that as well? So to the extent that the purchaser doesn't actually pay the full appraisal value, we obviously would not pay the full fair market value to the district.
I believe we do have an oral agreement in place from a potential purchaser, but for only the fair market value of the property, not for the additional administrative costs, whatever those may be. But I'll note that amount will likely be substantial depending on when we're counting, because as far back as I can trace, this property has been at issue for something like 20 years, and we've been trying to sell this parcel for the past 2. So there would be substantial administrative costs if we were to include those in the overall cost.
And I guess what I'm thinking is less on allocation of staff time and more on, out of pocket, like the appraisal fee and, things like that, maybe would be more appropriate for discussion with the purchaser, but, I'll leave that to staff.
Other questions on item B?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Parkhurst.
So this property was purchased as a part of what, 3.1 million that was given to the city to buy a whole host of properties, is that right?
That's correct.
And the original purchase price of the property was how much? Is 100 and
45.
Is it 145? I don't recall off the top of my head.
145? Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, let's move on. Item C, any questions for that item? Item D. Item E.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Parkhurst.
So I noticed there was a small change to the language on that. Mr. Garagosian, we're allowed to go ahead and do that on consent even with that small change?
Yes, so the issue isn't so much that it be on consent. The issue is, can you make an amendment to an ordinance on second reading and approve it?
Okay.
And the general rule is that you can, so long as the amendment is relatively insubstantial. If a substantial amendment was to be made, then it would be subject to first reading again. In this case, we're just removing one term from I believe it's the definition of development standards. And it's to clarify basically what staff's intention was and what's reflected in state density bonus law. So I don't think it's particularly contentious.
I think it's a good catch, so I'm glad that was caught.
Any other on E? And item F. Okay, well, let's open this up to public comment. Any of the items on the consent agenda? Do we have any emails?
No emails received and no speaker cards, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam City Clerk. Okay, we'll bring it back to the council. I'd like to entertain a motion for approval of the agenda, unless there's a motion for an amendment.
Mr. Mayor, not a motion for amendment, but just a comment, if I may.
Yes, please.
Just on item B on the consent, as much as I can appreciate Councilmember Creep's concern with some of the additional costs, it has been an issue that's been on our plate for quite a while, and I'm looking forward to pushing it off of our plate. But appreciating the fact that, again, that there has been a lot of time and resources put towards it, so I'm looking forward to approving that.
Did you want to explore an amendment, Councilman? Okay. Any other comments about anything on the?
I'll move to adopt or to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second?
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries unanimously. And moving right along, brings us to our public hearing on consideration of the adoption of Ordinance 1453, adding Chapter 6.10 and amending Section 6.16.010 of Chapter 8.16 of Title 8.
Good evening.
Wilson, how are you?
Good, Mayor Goss and council members. We're here today. Staff is bringing consideration for the adoption of Ordinance 1453. We are here because it was February 22nd of this year that the City Council approved the Sierra Madre Wildlife Management Plan. Along with the approval of the plan, the City Council directed us to take some steps towards some of the priorities of the plan. Before you tonight is an ordinance that will prohibit the feeding of wildlife in Sierra Madre. Staff took an approach for this ordinance to address both passive and active feeding. The active feeding prohibition specifically, and it's outlined in 610.030A, it is prohibited leaving or storing refuse or garbage in a negligent manner. It's also prohibited to leave or store pet food or seed in a negligent manner. Leaving or storing fruit, meat, dairy, vegetables, grain, or other food in a negligent manner is prohibited. And leaving or storing water sources in a negligent manner is prohibited. Now, we also have some passive feeding that may become an attractive for our wildlife. Our approach was not to prohibit composting, not to prohibit bird feeders throughout the town, but to have a tool to address them if they become a problem, if they become attractant to our wildlife. So among those, mitigating attractants in Section C of the same section of the code, we would require the securing or removing of outdoor refrigerators and freezers if needed. We would require the removing of bird feeders if it becomes necessary. We would require removing fruit tree litter. That's often a pretty important source for the wildlife, is to, you know, clean up that fruit that falls. We don't want to prohibit fruit trees. We have a mechanism to have a resident eliminate standing water, and that has additional benefits above and beyond the wildlife. And then finally, if we need to, we can require eliminating composting activities. We also wanted to, and I want to thank Mr. Garagosian. We're always trying to make our municipal code consistent, and he pointed out that this would be a good opportunity to add just one sentence in the chapter 816 under site nuisances. So your Exhibit B within the ordinance is pretty much unchanged. That's exactly the way it is now. We didn't make any changes. That's not really what we're looking to discuss. Hopefully you noticed at the very end of it, I think it's letter Q, we just point to our animal or wildlife prohibition on feeding. So our staff's recommendation is that the City Council introduce with first reading Ordinance 1453, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Sierra Madre, California, adding Chapter 6.10, Feeding of Wildlife Prohibited, to Title 6 under Animals, and amending Section 8.16.010, Property Maintenance-Nuisances of Chapter 8.16, Site Nuisances of Title 8, the Health and Safety portion of our municipal code, in order to prohibit the feeding of certain wildlife. And that's the end of my report, and I'd be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you for the report. I have a quick question. What, if you're thinking about the contributions of these various factors in attracting, say, bears, where does composting fit in? Is that a significant issue?
It can be. I have a number of anecdotal friends and stories from the community where the composting became too much of an attractant for the animals, specifically the bear. I also have another friend a little bit farther down in town that will put the chicken wire and build some apparatus to try to protect the composting, and that's been successful. So that's why we didn't want to prohibit it citywide.
Right, because we want to try to encourage that if at all possible.
Mm-hmm.
Are you saying that chicken wire stopped a bear from getting into?
Well, there's also some steel bars along. I got to look at the thing, and I kind of questioned it too. I said, really? And they said, yeah, you know, they come and sniff it, but they go for, you know, something easier.
Okay. Are there other questions?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Parkhurst.
So this points back to the municipal code 1.18, correct, for the enforcement?
Yes,
Is that right?
yes, the administrative penalty procedure, I believe is what we call it.
Yeah. Can you or Attorney Gargosian talk us through kind of what that is so that we're aware of it as a part of this discussion?
Real quick, I think it involves a warning. The second infraction is $100. The third is $200, and the fourth and subsequent infractions are $500. Typically, when we have a new ordinance on the books, there may be more than one warning, just to allow our residents to become familiar with what's required of them. And I imagine we would probably consider that step as well.
In Councilmember Parkhurst, there's a separate procedure for public nuisances. So if the administrative process doesn't work for citations, then we can also pursue the public nuisance procedures, which are a little more exacting on the person who's offending.
Just to follow up, does that permit taking action on our own for some of these things, or is that still just another fine and hope for compliance process?
No, that goes to the Planning Commission for review. There's a formal public hearing, and then if the applicant fails, or sorry, not the applicant in this case, if the individual who's violating, who's causing the public nuisance fails to correct it, staff can correct it, and staff can impose a lien on the property for the cost of correcting it. So it's it's more serious.
And what's the process? So if something happens, like what triggers this? What causes us to go into the penalty phase?
Sure. Well, it's very similar to a lot of other codes in town. Our code enforcement officer will either discover a code infraction upon inspection or upon complaint. And we envision that this will go along the lines pretty much of that. Another avenue for this to be a tool is reporting wildlife issues to Fish and Wildlife. And we have a portal now on our website, and we encourage our residents to report their encounters with wildlife. Fish and Wildlife will have just this other local ordinance as a tool to work with city code enforcement to mitigate whatever we need to do. So that's typically what I'm envisioning this to happen.
And then my last question, the staff and including the police department and Fish and Wildlife had done a lot of communication up in the canyon about this. Once this is adopted, assuming it is adopted, will there then be a communication program to further the communication on this?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why it's one of the more higher priority items of the plan. Clerk Aguilar and her team have done a fantastic job of really putting out a lot of helpful tips for wildlife management at this point. We're going to transition to something with a little bit more teeth. This ordinance would also go on any signage that we're contemplating, because I know we were thinking a sign, something to, you are entering a wildlife zone, feeding of wildlife prohibited, with our own municipal code cited on that. So I think there's a lot of ways that we can use this for publicity and really getting the word out.
And I said the last one was my last question, but I think this one. So how has the impact have been on the communication? It's a little bit tangential to this, but have we had issues? I don't know if Chief Armelin has stuff for us, but what's been the interaction between humans and bears since our last council meeting or since our last update?
Well, Chief Armelin and I do discuss this quite a bit, and there has been a dip in the reported incidents, specifically entering houses or vehicles, and that's a very welcome trend. We don't know how long it's going to last. We do know that the particular Bear 508 and the Cubs are still active in the community, but fortunately they haven't been as brazen as they may have been for that short period of time.
Other questions?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I actually had two comments to the ordinance, and one is in 6.10.030 in C. It made specific that it had to be a code compliance officer that would advise as to any enforcement issue. I'm wondering if that just can't be advised by the city of Sierra Madre. I don't know that we need to make it specific. I mean, it seems like if other communication is, I don't want there to be a technicality because, the city clerk or someone else reached out, that doesn't actually trigger remedial action.
Yeah, when you're putting an ordinance together like this, you're always considering occasionally neighbors don't get along, and they will call us to, be an arbitrator of some sort. Our code enforcement officer has done a really good job of realizing those situations when they happen. And so at this point, we do have a lot of trust in his discretion, and we're trying to avoid being the arbitrator if things get a little bit like that.
So you would expect that all of these types of issues would get funneled through that, and there wouldn't be errant communications that we would then find out later that weren't sort of official because they didn't follow the code?
We'll have to make sure, yeah, we'll have to make sure if a police officer, a public safety officer, or a management analyst hears about something that, it goes through the code enforcement, it's documented through his system, and it's done that way. You're correct, we just don't want to lose track of it.
And then my other point was in the exceptions for maintaining vegetable gardens, fruits and nuts trees. I just wanted to make sure that exception didn't somehow override the remedial action for removing the fruit tree litter or other vegetarian. So I just wonder if it makes sense to just cross-reference that in some way so that, that obviously maintaining a vegetable garden, fruit and nut trees and other plants would be, subject to the removal of the litter, so that we don't have an exception that swallows the actual rule.
Sure. No, that's understood. And in my view, I thought it was pretty clean, but it's a good point. If we want to make a correction that can avoid another first reading, I'll defer to Mr. Garagosian on that. If we do have to, do something and come back to you for another first reading, we'll do that too.
Sounds like it's similar to what we talked about earlier.
Yes, this wouldn't require another first reading. We can make the amendment and have a second reading at the following meeting.
Okay.
Other questions? Hearing none, I will turn this, it is a public hearing, we'll turn this over to the public for their comments on the agenda item.
Mr. Mayor, we have a speaker card from D. Alcorn.
D. Alcorn of Grandview. When I first read this, I had a problem. I said, oh, what are they going to do here? They're going to shut down everything we do here. And Mr. Carlson has clarified quite a bit my concerns, and so that it sounded like it's very restrictive. You're going to have one thing and another like that, and I thought that was just way too much. And so he's clarified that, and I appreciate Mr. Carlson's approach here, and it's reasonable. And I think that because I was loaded for bear because I thought this thing was really bad. Okay, I really did. And but I to let you know, but I think that it's still ought to keep in mind. And I had this whole thing I was going to read to you, but I think that he's curtailed a lot of my verbiage I was going to use. And I will conclude with one thing though, because my concerns were overall thing. And I'll just read my final conclusion so it won't be another marathon meeting again. And I think these accomplish this, but I want to keep it in mind. Don't use a freight car to haul a cube of butter. You can do this other thing and way overdo it. And I think that there's been a modicum of common sense shown there, and I think we ought to use common sense. The other thing is minimize restrictions. We had enough with our latest questionable virus mandates, and I think we don't want more of that. So I think that I see that in keeping with that, and because I was really quite excited when I read that, and I'm glad to say that there is a good outcome as far as I'm concerned. So thank you very much. I'm going to read a lot more.
Thank you, Mr. Alcorn. I'm glad you're not loaded for bear.
So to speak.
I just had to throw that in there. Other public comments?
Mr. Mayor, there are no other public comment cards submitted.
Okay. So I'll bring this back to our council and see if we, what do we want to do here?
Just comment.
Please, Mayor Pro Tem.
I just want to commend Management Analyst Carlson, National Resources Commission, the Police Department, and Fish and Wildlife. Since we approved the wildlife management plan, there seemed to have been significantly better communication with Fish and Wildlife through our police department and through Management Analyst Carlson's office. We got some signs up very quickly after that meeting. And now we're sitting here with a reasonable common sense ordinance. So I'm very happy and pleased with the expediency our staff and local government has moved.
Other comments? Well, I'll concur with you. Absolutely ditto. Very, very pleased as well. Hearing no other comments, I'd like to see if there's a motion for approval.
I move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously, which moves us on to a discussion item having to do with the implementation of smoke-free multi-unit housing ordinance.
Good evening, Mayor Goss and council members. So I'll be presenting on the follow-up questions and responses in regards to smoke-free multi-unit housing. So a bit of background, at the council meeting last year, on October 12th, City Council requested a list of questions be answered in regards to a presentation that was given on smoke-free multi-unit housing. So the questions and responses will be provided in the following slides. So here we have questions 1 through 3. What city-related fees and costs does a property owner incur as a result of doing business in the city? So other than the city business license fee, there are no other fees unless the property owner wishes to make any changes to their residential property. What happens to individuals addicted to cigarettes if we impose a ban, and are there resources available to assist them? So the city has multiple options that they can take. A few examples would be postponing its effective date, giving the landlord and tenants time to access tobacco cessation. Giving the landlord and tenants time to access tobacco cessation resources. The city could also access resources provided by the City of Hope and Kaiser Permanente to provide to landlords and share with their tenants. And then in addition to that, the city could also implement a buffer system within the ordinance that would allow residents to smoke so long as they kept a minimum distance away from the building. And question 3, what is the rationale for excluding single-family homes from the multi-unit smoking ban? And the main concern with the ban would be for residents living within multifamily residences with shared ventilation, shared walls, and limited buffers. And with single-family homes, there usually are sufficient property line setbacks to get rid of those issues. Questions 4 and 5, are there any current incentives that can be offered to encourage property owners? There currently are none, and if this were to be implemented as an ordinance, they wouldn't be necessary, as property owners would be required to abide by its terms. Question 5 is in regards to Sierra Madre Municipal Code, referencing protected fire areas and natural open space. So as addressed in the municipal code, protected fire areas and natural open space are not synonymous. And additionally, there's no map that specifies protected fire areas. However, within the city's hazard prevention safety element, there's a map provided that includes very high fire hazard severity zones, and within that map, everything north of Grandview Avenue would be included as a protected fire area, and this area encompasses all of the city's natural open space. Here we have questions 6 through 8. Does Sierra Madre Municipal Code, Chapter 8, this is in regards to smoking in public places, apply to public parks? So smoking is prohibited on all public property, so yes, it would apply to public parks. Question 7, what percentage of residents in Sierra Madre are smokers? So as of recently, there hasn't been a ton of data regarding this, but Day One Pasadena conducted a public opinion survey between March of 2019 and February of 2020, where 475 residents completed a survey, and within that sample, 5% of respondents were current tobacco users. And question 8, in regards to designated smoking areas, so within city and county code, there currently is no defined definition of what a designated smoking area is, but they're usually specified as a small area, usually designated by signs, that is dedicated to smoking. Questions 9 and 10, is vaping a hazard? Yes, it is. Vaping and the secondhand smoke caused as a result of vaping still could carry nicotine and other harmful chemicals that are a risk for users and others nearby. Question 10, in regards to ordinance and how this ban would be enforced. So there are 3 options the city could take in regards to who would be responsible for enforcing. One would be the city, where responsibility would fall under the code enforcement officer, police department, or fire department. Second option being through the landlord, where the landlord would be required to A, notify tenants of non-smoking buildings, B, post non-smoking signs, and C, include prohibition in the lease, making smoking in the building a violation within the actual lease agreement. And lastly, the responsibility could be by the tenant and the city. The ordinance can be drafted to create a private right of action for residents to sue their neighbors for damages or enjoin them for smoking in the building. Questions 11 through 13. Questions 11 and 12 both refer to cannabis, both recreational and medical, and whether or not they would be included within the smoking ban. And the answer to both is that yes, both would apply in the smoking ban. Question 13, would the ordinance apply to ADUs? So this would be determined by the city council. They may consider including attached ADUs, seeing that they share walls and ventilation systems, but choose to exclude those ADUs that are detached from the primary dwelling unit. And lastly, question 14, how many other small cities have adopted similar restrictions? So over 70 cities in California have adopted anti-smoking regulations. The following cities, small cities, which have populations under 50K, have adopted such regulations. So Bell Gardens, Calabasas, Manhattan Beach, South Pasadena, Temple City, and West Hollywood. So staff recommendation. Staff recommends City Council provide policy direction regarding whether to draft an ordinance that would ban smoking in multi-unit housing. And alternatives would be to direct staff to draft an ordinance, direct staff not to draft an ordinance, or any other options desired by council. And that's all.
Excellent report, Analyst Intern Reynosa.
Thank you.
Questions for?
I do have a question, but I'm not sure it's properly addressed to management analyst and intern Reynosa. I wasn't quite remembering what the connection between the smoking ban and the protected fire area was. Is there already a ban on smoking in protected fire areas? Is that why we were talking about that and then trying to define what that area was? I just wasn't linking in my mind kind of what the connection was. Does anyone remember?
No.
I believe that was the issue, is whether we can smoke in open spaces. And there was a distinction between natural open spaces and, I forget the term, but it's man-made open spaces, okay. So like parks. And we determined that in the natural open space, the very high fire hazard severity zone prevents smoking. And in the man-made open spaces like our parks, smoking is prohibited under our municipal code.
Other questions?
A question regarding question 12, medical cannabis, and it's my understanding that there's different modes and methods of ingesting cannabis, but let's say this is truly for a medical need. Can we prohibit somebody from actually taking their medicine? If it is actually, I know they don't have to burn it and smoke it, they could probably ingest it other ways, but can we have an ordinance which prohibits somebody from taking their medicine in one of the modes, if that makes sense?
So I'm just going to reference the Health and Safety Code here. It says it allows the city to prohibit smoking medicinal cannabis in a place where smoking is prohibited by law. So we can prohibit someone from not ingesting it, of course. They can take it in other forms, but we can prevent them from smoking it in their units if the city council so chooses.
Interesting. Thank you.
That's interesting. Other questions? Okay. Hearing none, I'd like to open this up for public comment.
Mr. Mayor, one speaker card was received from Colette Monell.
Hi, can I start? Okay. Hi, good evening. My name is Colette Monell, and I also emailed in a public comment, so I'll just make it brief. So I'm a resident of Sierra Madre and I own a condo. And I wanted to thank you for taking your time to discuss this potential smoke-free multi-unit housing ordinance or whatever decision you come to. But as a condo owner that has been negatively impacted by secondhand smoke, it is extremely important to have an ordinance that protects multi-family housing tenants from hazards of secondhand smoke. So therefore, I suggest implementing a comprehensive ordinance of a smoke-free multi-family units. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, there were 2 emails received by city staff regarding this item. One was from Ms. Monell, as she indicated, and the other from Mr. Doyle, and both emails were forwarded to City Council for review and have been posted to the city's website for public access.
Yes, we did read those emails. Thank you. Okay, so our task tonight is to decide whether we want staff to draft an ordinance, and if we do, what would the outline of that ordinance be? So who wants to begin this conversation?
Since I asked to put it on the agenda, I'll go ahead and
Fair enough.
kick it off. So when I asked to put this on the agenda, I had no idea how complicated this would be. There's a lot of parts to this, a lot of things to consider, a lot of ins and outs, and I look forward to hearing comments from my fellow council members here. Where my mind is right now is focusing this on multi-tenant housing, multi-unit housing, I guess is probably maybe the right term, and looking at it as turnover happens. So as people move out of their units, that there would be I think an ordinance is the right term, the mode of this, that it would create those units as non-smoking. And I think that the benefit of that is it saves the landowner cost, so they don't have to have the additional cost when they turn it over the next time, and it promotes public health. I think that's probably, to me, it seems like the middle road on this. I do not want something like that, though, to be used as a hammer to evict people out of their homes. Smoking is extremely addictive. It is a health threat to the person, and a public threat. And I think trying to balance all of those is the thing that I've wrestled with as I've been considering this.
Interesting. Other thoughts on this?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilman Creeps.
I appreciate Councilmember Parkhurst's interest in weighing, and I do recognize that there are competing interests here. I guess where I come out is, if we feel like secondhand smoke is a public nuisance that we should address by going through the process of putting in an ordinance, I would hate to think that it would only protect in those instances where someone was actually by chance moving out, because I do think that we live in a place where residency is often long term, and I think some of the folks that are experiencing this issue, perhaps like Ms. Monell, if they're living next to someone who plans on being here for decades to come, this would not provide them with the health benefits that I think we should be looking at affording them. So I guess while I'm sympathetic to the idea that obviously the residents that are the smokers have an addiction and have a health issue as well, I do think that if we're going to come to the conclusion that secondhand smoke is something we want to protect against, I think we have to be a little bit more proactive than just waiting for things to turn over, because especially in this town, I think turnover can be very, very lengthy.
Sure. Other thoughts?
Yeah, so the balance is something, and I brought up that addiction issue when we first talked about this, and I'm pleased with day one and how they've been engaging with the city and some of the information they've been providing. Obviously, this is a public nuisance, and I do understand it. What I don't want to do is have an ordinance that has no teeth, and it's an ordinance that we can't. Why have an ordinance on the book if we can't enforce it, or if it's difficult to enforce? I do think I think about incentives a lot. There is an incentive for landlords not to have smokers within their within their apartment buildings or duplexes or triplexes or whatever it may be. So I think we have to be creative here in a way to enable the landlords to have a mechanism to enforce their rules, because why would anybody want smokers if it's going to cost them a lot more within their dwellings that they own? So I don't know. I'm trying to figure out what this looks like, where the city can support landlords in a manner of not having smoking within the residential homes, because it is apparent to me that it is an issue. I know if I was living in a smaller area and I had a child or a baby, I would be concerned about the welfare of their lungs and health, for sure, and I sympathize and empathize with that. So my concerns, again, are having something, an ordinance that can actually work, and that's the tough part of what we're doing here today, I think.
I feel like I've been avoiding this for a few years, because I know it came up a couple of times during my tenure here, as well as the mayor's. On a policy level, I've had a really hard time with this. I remember, I'm going to age myself, sometime when I visited New York City for my first time, and it was when they first banned smoking in bars. And I was like, gosh, I'm in New York, I want to smoke in a bar, even though I'm not a smoker. It was just the idea of it. And in my opinion, I was like, well, it's their business. They should be able to do what they want. And if you want to patron in it, you can patron. If you decide not to, you don't have to. The issue is, in this case, it's very different, right? If people are living in a place and this is what they came into, or a new smoker came next door as a neighbor, it's a very different concept than smoking in a bar in New York. On a personal level, some of you know where I live, and I have smokers in the morning there every morning, and it's really tough when you're working out and you're smelling the smoke, and on a personal level, it's extremely bothersome. So I can appreciate the concern, and also as we're looking at the medical implications for secondhand smoke. With all that being said, too, I think I'd like to think we can design something with learning from the other cities that have implemented it. I hear the issue about teeth and making sure that we have an ordinance that can really make a difference. I also have a concern about enforcement. How much of our resources do we have to go to enforcement of something like this? So I don't know what it could look like. I was seeing here with Santa Monica and Huntington Park and Baldwin Park having something in place to enforce going to small claims court. It's a venue. Is that something we can consider? The phasing in, and Councilmember Krebs and I think Mayor Pro Tem, you had a point too, is the issue is the long-term effects of smoke, secondhand smoke, if we do have an implementation period. But I think if we do consider this, an implementation period is going to be necessary. We have to allow for landlords to ramp up for this. We have to allow for residents to understand, a certain date as to what that could happen at that point. It may not be easy, but I saw here is a city of Calabasas that had a 4-year implementation plan, but it included the outreach, it included awareness, and included a deadline date. So I'm open to considering this if that's the direction of the council, but I want us to be cognizant of the impact for enforcement, cost, and also for landlords as well as existing tenants. And that is a long way of saying I don't know what the answer is, but there are some things that we can, I think, pull from other cities and the way that they've designed their ordinances.
I really don't have anything original to add to any what you've just said. I do want to say, I think I said this last time we had this on our agenda, that I feel very strongly we ought to do something. I think smoking is very annoying to people who don't smoke, and it's dangerous too. And I think it's our job as public servants to try to mitigate and reduce danger to our citizens as much as we can. So I really want an ordinance of some type. I do hear you though on the enforcement issue. I think that I'm not sure how that would work. I don't know if we want to add new jobs to our police department. They're already pretty well booked up. Would this be a code enforcement question? Do you bring the health department to do this? Do they do it from a county level? I'm not sure how that would work. But it would seem to me that we could define the areas where the smoke is most dangerous to people, and come up with some kind of means legally to allow people to pursue some remedy. A small claims court perhaps, maybe just a citation that could be issued ministerially, maybe in progressive amounts over a period of time. Something like that. I'd like to see what the city staff could come up with. Maybe we can't do something, but I think we should give it a shot. Any other thoughts?
Well, I'll just way back in. I'm pleased that we want to move further on this. I guess, yeah. So I would support an ordinance and something stronger than the transition. It is a public health, and so I'm glad to hear that there's more support for this to try to get something that balances that cost. That balances the cost and burden on the city. So I would be supportive of giving guidance to staff to draft an ordinance that considers that. That considers how we can do this in a way that has a little bit more of a push than a passive waiting for someone to move out. So I'm glad to hear that other people feel strongly about this.
I was just going to speak out about the enforcement. I was looking at the various options that were presented in the staff report that piggybacked on other municipalities that have done have passed ordinances around this, and I did like the idea of the enforcement being specific to the landlords or the tenants, and sort of moving it away from code enforcement and city enforcement, because I think that gives landlords the tools that they need, as Mayor Pro Tem mentioned, to either create smoke-free units or have a tool to leverage against folks that are continually violating the ban on smoking, if that's the way we go. And then I also like the fact that some tenants, giving tenants some rights where they may not actually want to go through the small claims process, but that being said, it gives them some leverage with their landlord as well if they have the right to do so and can seek damages, and so again can kind of have some power in an otherwise sometimes imbalance of power relationship between a tenant and a landlord. So I do like both of those options, or as possibilities, particularly because it shifts the focus away from city resources and fines and things like that, which could be incentives, but I do think each individual situation is going to be a little bit different, and the tenants and the landlords on the ground in that situation might be better suited to know how to best resolve things instead of just our blanket imposition of fines in an escalating way.
Please.
Sorry, really quickly, Mayor. Just on top of that, I remember reading also too that maybe allowing for leases to break leases based on, if a tenant says, I have a neighbor next to me that is a smoker, I would like to break in. I don't know what that looks like in terms of the legal piece, but I feel like I had read that somewhere, if that can be considered also.
Everything that you said I agreed to, except the impact this would have on condo owners, because I don't think the landlord issue is really an issue for them.
Good point.
I really want to make certain that they get some relief too.
That's a good point.
And I'm not sure how to do that.
So that would just be like a private right of action
I think
against
something
your
like that.
your neighbors, essentially.
Something like that. Maybe as long as, it doesn't, like we've all said this, we have very limited resources in terms of city staff and our police personnel and our code enforcement officers already overburdened. So I'd hate to see us get in the business of having to enforce every possible problem that could associate with this ordinance. Maybe I could ask staff if they're getting any direction from us or by osmosis here, or are we?
I think in addition to the breakdown of how we'll enforce the ordinance, we're seeking guidance on a couple more things. One of them would be whether or not the ordinance would apply to just rental or also like for sale, like for example, condo owners who also living in multi-unit spaces. And then second, what would be the threshold for applications, looking at how many units on a single person and like what enforcement would look like around there. I think that kind of piggybacks onto the overall enforcement issue on how that will look like.
Could you repeat the second item that you had?
So the threshold for applications and looking at how many units on a single property owner and how enforcement.
Basically, how to define multi-unit
Yeah.
for this
Yes.
purpose.
Correct. Is it going to be 2 or more, or is it going to be some greater number? Because for council to keep in mind, if we're contemplating 2 or more, it's going to capture single-family homes and ADUs. If we're contemplating something greater than 5, then if we contemplate 5 or greater, then it's definitely going to be apartments. If it's 4, it could be a fourplex through an SB9 application in a single-family R1 zone. So it matters where we draw the line for the threshold.
Yeah, I'm leaning toward 5. Thinking about condos, though, there's generally common areas. I've never lived in a condo, but it's my understanding there's generally common areas, so there's some kind of HOA or some type of association that would fund and take care of those common areas. I don't know if we have something in the books that gives them the ability to have it part of their homeowners or condo owners agreement, that would be helpful. And I don't know how that works either, but.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
And again, just taking from other cities and what they've learned and maybe applicable to condos is, issuing something about the common areas. I think that can be a stronger piece to it. And then, just like Mayor Pro Tem said, maybe there is a way to incorporate that. And I don't know if all condos have the shared area space, but I think thinking about shared area space will be an important piece in the ordinance.
Meaning what? Like allowing for smoking areas in the common space, or are you saying
not?
Or are you saying not allowing? Okay.
And so, again, if there's smoking in general, but in the condo areas, I think that tries to account for that type of living versus apartment living. Doesn't necessarily solve all of it, but I just think the common area space is going to be an important piece to underscore in it.
So are we making this making the city non-smoking overall? You can't smoke in the parks, you can't smoke in the open space, you can't smoke in common areas, you can't smoke. The only place you could smoke is in a private residence and in the yard of the private residence. Is that right?
Or in the public right-of-way, like a sidewalk or a street.
Okay. Have cities gone completely smoke-free?
Yes.
I think Beverly Hills actually is trying to prohibit the sale of, tobacco within the city.
And I believe the city of Glendale is also a smoke-free city. You can't even smoke on the sidewalk, if I'm not mistaken, in the city of Glendale.
So, okay. Thank you.
It sounds, draconian, but, what are we talking about here? We are talking about secondhand smoke does hurt people, particularly if you're in a closed place and you've got somebody next door to you and it's coming through the air conditioning system or through the roof or. So I think we've got consensus here. We want an ordinance. I think we are kind of groping a little bit in terms of how we can not net in too much, but capture the real problems that do exist with multi-unit housing, which are primarily apartments, but should also include some kind of treatment of condominiums. And it tries to minimize city involvement and the costs associated with it.
And not penalize landlords,
Right.
because they're not always there, right?
Right.
They can't. But aid them in implementing it to their benefit.
Right. They can use this for their own benefit, sure.
Now, there was one city that had like $150,000 on communication. So we adopt an ordinance, which I'm in support of. So then, do we have to consider the one-time financial cost of communication? And I can't imagine for us it would be that large. But is that a consideration or a concern?
It wouldn't be for me. I mean, we have to publicize just about everything we do.
Yeah.
That has any consequence.
Yeah, I mean, but I can't see it being a large budget item.
No.
Okay.
No.
And also targeted to landlords, you know, that will limit the communications
Right.
out.
Maybe landlords and condo owners.
Mhm.
It's pretty much the target. I think having the ordinance on the books, once you've sent out those initial communications, I think that's probably going to achieve a lot of what you're shooting for here. Because there's nothing there now, but I think that's going to get their attention. They'll understand that this is something that's serious. I hope. I would think so. If I was a landlord, I sure would.
Mayor, I think we have adequate direction.
Wow.
And you guys are magicians.
Yes.
Good. That's good, because I hope that so that we can look forward to an ordinance coming back at some point in the future. Good. That's very gratifying to hear.
And City Manager Renaud, so what's the timing you would see in coming that back, or Attorney Gargosian?
Looking at maybe 2 council meetings?
It's phenomenal. Okay.
Good deal. Any other comments from my colleagues up here? Well, folks, that brings us to the end of our agenda. I'd like to get to find out if you have any ideas for future agenda items. I mentioned a possible car show in Sierra Madre, and I looked out in the audience. I didn't get a lot of excited looks, but I do know there is some interest. So I don't know if I'm going to put on the council agenda, but I think I'll ask staff if we could maybe get the Community Services Commission to maybe get it on their agenda and see if there's any interest at that level.
Well, Mayor, there's definitely interest from the car showers.
Yes,
They were
that's
so
for sure.
excited.
Yes, they were. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I guess there was another show going on at the same time down in Arcadia. They had like 150 cars, and a couple of the guys who were up there were telling me, you know what, you could fill this whole boulevard all the way down to Baldwin with all the cars in the area.
I wonder if we could get one of those car clubs or associations to sponsor something, you know, in conjunction with or in addition to a show, so that, you know, they become, you know, a sponsor of our 4th of July parade, or, you know, just to bring in other possible funding sources for some of the things that we lean on, you know, a lot of our local businesses and organizations so heavily. It seems like if they're interested in showing their cars in our town, you know, they might be interested in supporting other, you know, other aspects of our community.
Maybe we could pop that in as a suggestion for discussion. Thank you. Any other ideas? Okay, well, can I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 And we are adjourned. Thank you for coming, everybody.